So to finish up that last point, apocrine gland secretion, that method is where the apical portion of the cell is shed off and sacrificed. It regrows and simply does it all over again. Okay, so let's move on to holocrine. Holo meaning entire, so the entire cell ruptures, and that's how oily sebaceous glands work to secrete their material called sebum, which is an oily secretion. And in that situation, or in this method of secretion, the entire cell is shed along with the material in the secretory vessels. All right, so holocrine secretion, like in the sebaceous glands at the hair follicles. Okay, very simple coverage here of gland structure. Here's the figure 3.9, and gets kind of involved here, but we'll keep this simple, okay? So if it's a unicellular gland, it's only one cell, and they don't even show you that here. But if it's a unicellular gland structure, it's only one simple cell, and it secretes mucus, for example, like the goblet cells that we'll see with things like pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. If it's multicellular, there's more than one cell that secretes, more than one gland cell that secretes, and usually there's a duct. All right? So if it's a simple gland, the duct is not branched, and that's all of these that you see up here. All right? So multicellular glands that have a single duct. So all of these are simple glands. You do not need to know the subtypes. So you do not need to know simple tubular, simple coiled tubular, simple branch tubular, etc. Simply know that it's a simple gland, meaning more than one cell, and one duct that is not branched. Or it's a compound gland, meaning multiple cells, and the duct is branched, and that's it. You do not need to know compound tubular or compound alveolar, also called acinar. Okay, so just again, only what you see in the text portion here. You do not need to know these subcategories. Clear? Okay. All right, let's move on to connective tissue. Connective tissue is very unique in the sense that it's very diverse. For example, blood. Where's blood? Here we go. It's a liquid connective tissue, and bone is a solid connective tissue. They're both connective tissues, even though they are very different from each other. They do have some similarities, though. Connective tissue is important in structural integrity of the body, transportation of fluids, think blood, protects organs, cushioning organs, surrounding organs, defense against pathogens. In our blood, we have white blood cells, which is part of our immune system, and binds tissues together, helps envelop blood vessels, helps envelop muscles. Connective tissue helps bind muscles to bone and helps bind bones together with tendons and ligaments, as we'll talk about in this chapter or in this section. There are highly specialized cells. There's extracellular material, whether it's fibers or ground substance. So this is a picture of something called areolar connective tissue, and you can see nuclei, the dark staining blobs of some of the cells in areolar connective tissue. But mostly what you see are these lines that kind of crisscross across the tissue that are different thicknesses. These are the extracellular fibers. These are fibers produced by the cells. They're outside of the cells, hence extracellular fibers. And ground substance is also the material secreted by the cells that's external to the cells. And that's all the open space that you see here. This is very different from epithelial tissue, where all you saw were cells. So the matrix is everything external to the cells. It includes the extracellular fibers, the lines that you see here, and the ground substance, which is the open space here, that in reality it's not empty, it's filled with a material that can be semi-solid or semi-liquid. It could be the consistency of really runny jello, or consistency almost like rubber. Okay, so the matrix is everything outside the cell, sometimes called the extracellular matrix. So different types of connective tissues, 3 basic types. Connective tissue proper, which is what you see here on the left, fluid connective tissue, or blood, and supporting connective tissue, cartilage and bone. With the connective tissue proper, there's loose and there's dense. Basically, the loose connective tissue proper is much more pliable than the dense connective tissue proper, which is heavier, stronger, denser. And we'll jump into these subtypes as we go through this section. So first, let's talk about the connective tissue proper cells. There are cells that are found in residence. In other words, they're always there. So these are the fixed cells. Fibroblasts that produce fibers. Let me see here. So where is it? Oh, here we go. Fibroblasts, okay? Fibroblasts. So this cell is producing fibers, extracellular fibers. Now in the diagram here, you can see the entire cell, its plasma membrane and its nucleus. On a real slide, you won't see that. You'll just see the dark, where's my cursor? Here we go. You'll just see the dark nucleus, but you won't see the cell. So, fibroblasts produce fibers. Excuse me. Fixed macrophages. These are immune system cells that are phagocytic, meaning they engulf cells with pseudopodia. And these are fixed in the sense that these are always going to be found in residence in connective tissue. In other words, that's where they hang out looking for pathogens, which are disease-causing organisms like bacteria. There's adipocytes. And these are cells that produce and store lipid, meaning fat. So these are some fat cells that are found in connective tissue. And then there are melanocytes that produce a pigment called melanin that would give connective tissue a coloration. There's also wandering cells. Cells that move into and out of connective tissue. And these are free macrophages that roam around. They're phagocytic. Same function as fixed macrophages, except these move into and out of the bloodstream, into and out of our connective tissue. Lymphocytes, which is another type of white blood cell, immunity cell that also moves in and out of connective tissue, transported again by the bloodstream. And macrophages, neutrophils and eosinophils, yet another type of white blood cell, immunity system cells. And again, cells that enter and exit connective tissue, and again transported by the cardiovascular system by the blood supply. Excuse me, the fibers themselves, the extracellular fibers, the thicker, most obvious ones are collagen fibers, made up of a strong protein. They're the most abundant. They're found in, well, throughout the body, but in the skin. And collagen fibers are super abundant in things like tendons and ligaments that are very strong. The thinner reticular fibers form a branching framework, and that's what you see here in brown. And they form a meshwork or a framework, in particular in structures like our liver and our spleen. And then finally there are elastic fibers here in blue, thin ones, and they're highly branched, and they have a protein called elastin that's very stretchy and has elasticity like a rubber band, and they give connective tissue its elastic characteristics. So if you were to kind of grab your skin on your arm and pull it up and release it, it kind of bounces back, right? Because it has a fair amount of collagen reticular fibers, and especially elastic fibers that give it elasticity. Oh, and by the way, on a slide, micrograph, it's easy to distinguish the collagen fibers because they're very thick, but the reticular and elastic fibers, it's hard to distinguish between them. They're simply the thinner fibers. All right, so like if I want you to identify this thin fiber in connective tissue, the correct answer is reticular fiber or elastic fiber. If I want you to identify this thick fiber, there's only one correct answer, collagen fiber. Okay, so some of the connective tissue proper, loose ones first, the ones we've been talking about primarily, areolar connective tissue, the one we've been talking about, areolar connective tissue. Most widely distributed connective tissue, it's really has a high amount of ground substance, and it's a packing material found in places in the body where there would otherwise be kind of open spaces. So locations here, right, within and deep to the dermis of the skin. So we'll talk about this when we talk about the integumentary system, the skin, in the next chapter. But notice it's found in many places throughout the body. Sorry, my cursor goes to sleep. And the functions, cushions, surrounds organs, provides support, has phagocytic cells for defense against pathogens, but very abundant. Oh, you can ignore this lecture outlines. That was for my previous time I taught the class when we actually met face-to-face. So ignore lecture outlines. This is our lecture. Okay, sorry. Adipose connective tissue, or fat, basically, helps cushion and insulate in the body. So deep to the skin. So again, we'll talk about adipose connective tissue when we talk about the integumentary system, the skin, in the next chapter. In places where our body where we collect fat, right? Buttocks, breasts, around our belly or your beer belly, padding around your eyes and kidneys, provides padding, shock absorption, insulation, but also energy because it stores energy. The cells are adipocytes, and they fill with lipid or fat when we have excess nutrient storage in our body. Okay, another one, reticular connective tissue. Abundant, superabundant reticular fibers that provides a framework, a meshwork for certain organs. Macrophages are abundant as well in places like the liver, spleen, and the lymph nodes. So when we do the digestive system and the lymphatic system, we'll talk about reticular tissue again at that point. On a slide, the reticular fibers stain really well, a dark brown to black color because of the slide stain that they use, that the stain is picked up really well by the reticular fibers, so they're readily visible. Okay, moving on to dense connective tissues. Abundant collagen fibers that give this tissue a, well, denser appearance, but a lot of strength. Okay, so dense regular connective tissue, the collagen fibers are very abundant and lined up kind of in a parallel fashion, giving it a lot of strength, resistance to pulling stresses. So tendons and ligaments have a high abundance of collagen fibers, making them dense connective tissues. So tendons are those specialized structures that attach muscle to bone, so they need to be really strong. Aponeurosis is a flattened sheet-like tendon, and we'll look at this when we do the skeletal and the muscle system a little more closely. And then ligaments are dense connective tissue that connects bone to bone, and we'll look at that again when we do the skeletal system. So locations and functions here, as you see in your figure 314. Elastic tissue, we'll jump into this in our next lecture.